the most anticipated event in all of One Piece, the God Valley flashback, is finally here, and for the next few chapters, Oda is going to be unveiling the curtain on what happened on this legendary island. And with the recent release of Chapter 1160, it's become incredibly clear that Oda will show us the events that take place on this island through the lens of 4 important characters. Roger, Rox, Garp, and Garling will all have a massive impact on the future of the story, more so than they already have after we learn the events that happened on God Valley. And today we'll be talking about why these 4 characters are specifically what Oda chose to show us the events of God Valley through, as well as the things we should be looking out for when it comes to these characters during this flashback, because there's a lot of implications that their actions could have. If you enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to stick around to the end for a secret 5th character that Oda has yet to reveal will be present on God Valley. So before we get into why each of these 4 is important individually, I want to talk about the impact that these 4 characters will have all together on the story of One Piece, and the most glaring effect that they will have is the strength of the One Piece world. As a reader, I can't say I've seen a level of strength that has ascended higher than the Luffy versus Kaido fight, but we know that there is a level higher than that exists in the world, we just don't know what it entails. So I think because characters like Garp, Roger, Rox, and Garling are all going to be present and fighting each other on God Valley means we're finally going to get a glimpse at what this higher tier of strength means, and potentially see what characters like Shanks, Mihawk, Dragon, and Akainu will have in the future of the story. That is, of course, if Oda takes the time to show us these skills that these characters are using during the fights. If he decides to just make minor clashes, then maybe these questions won't be answered. But a question that I would bet on getting answered in the God Valley flashback is the secret behind damaging immortality. Because of the Elbaf arc, we know the God's Knights also have the same immortality that the Gorosei have, and we have characters like Garp, Roger, and Rox going up against the God's Knights. I refuse to believe that this tier of character wasn't able to damage people like Garling or his subordinates. I think we're very possibly going to get the answer as to how to damage immortality, because someone like Garp or Roger or maybe even Rox probably figured out how to do it. But that aside, instead of looking at these 4 as a group, if we pick apart their roles individually during this arc, you can see there's a ton of implications that their character arcs would have on the story, so let's get into that. And I'd like to start with Garp. I think the biggest curiosity I have with Garp is what changed Garp into what he is today, likely happened on God Valley. Garp seems to have a lot of the same attitude and ideals currently as he did when he was a young Marine, but there definitely is a stark contrast between his young self and his old self when it comes to the distaste he has for the Celestial Dragons. So I think with Garp, we should be looking out for his involvement with the Celestial Dragons on God Valley, and I'm really curious to see his reaction to things like the hunting games, and if it not only influences how he acts currently in the story, but will maybe also influence the side he's going to take at the end of the story. I think young Garp cared a lot less about the fate of the world and really just wanted to fight strong people like Roger, but if at God Valley we see Garp's harsh reaction to innocent civilians getting killed by Celestial Dragons, maybe it will be foreshadowing a potential side turning at the end of the story, where Garp ends up siding with his grandson Luffy instead of remaining in the side of the Navy. I think there is a lot of mystery about where Garp's character is going to end up in the end of the story, and now that we're about to see how Garp's character evolved on God Valley, I think the answer to that could come from this incident. And similar to Garp, I want to see what changed Roger into what he is today via this incident. Roger is an extremely interesting case because in this entire flashback, Oda has been showing us Roger as kind of a goofy simp who doesn't really get anything done despite his overwhelming strength. While this totally could just be Oda turning Roger into a Luffy-like character, someone who's fine with getting beat up by his crew but still remains the captain, I would love for God Valley to be the first place that Oda shows us this demon-like Roger, this person that he becomes when he's trying to protect his friends. Not only do I think that would apply a lot of credence to his character and show us the reason why he would become the Pirate King in the future, but I also think Oda really needs to show us Roger's full potential because he's kind of been getting slapped around by not only Rox and Shaki, but also the fandom. A lot of people forget that Roger is the Pirate King, and a lot of people are giving Rox credit over Roger, so I think Oda should use this incident to gas up the person who started the story in the first place. With Roger, I would also be looking out for the God Valley incident having any influence on the future of his journey before he became the Pirate King. For example, was there any world government influence in his decision to go and find the One Piece, or at least make it to the end of the Grand Line? Was something revealed on God Valley that made him realize there was a massive treasure out there? Did the fall of his rival in Rox impact him in any way and turn him into a more serious character? Once again, similar to Garp, there is this large contrast between who Roger is now and who we know him as when he was older, so I'm curious to see if any of the events on God Valley transformed him into that future character, the one who would go on to become the Pirate King. And speaking of Roger's rival, Rox has a massive spotlight on him for the God Valley incident, considering this is practically his flashback right now. Not only is the God Valley flashback going to tell us a lot about Rox and his character, but I think it's also going to apply a ton of context to Blackbeard's character. We see in chapter 1160 that Blackbeard is terrified or even traumatized by the events happening on his home island, so this could be a huge reason why Blackbeard's character turned out as he did today. And I think if we get any Rox and Blackbeard interactions, it could clue us in on a ton of Blackbeard's character motives, or at least the character arc that Oda has planned for him, so definitely look out for that. Of course, there is also the Davy Jones lineage and Emu, both who have insane relations with Rox in this flashback. I think Rox may be the most interesting character during this incident because he's a character who has had a confrontation with Emu in the first place, and considering now we know that Rox has this legendary lineage that Emu is trying to erase, it is possible that God Valley could be the moment where we finally see what Emu looks like, but I know that's a stretch because Emu is likely the final villain of the story, so it's unclear if Oda wants to reveal his cards here. But considering Rox is an insanely strong character, has this legendary lineage that Emu wants to erase, and the fact that a lot of people forget this, that this island will end up getting erased by the end of the incident, there could be another Emu and Rox interaction here, so definitely keep an eye on what Rox has going on during this incident. Lastly, the most interesting in my opinion is Figureland Garling. In an island full of mysterious characters, I think Garling is still the most mysterious, considering we don't exactly know his true motivation, both during this flashback and currently in the story. Once this flashback ends, I'm probably going to make a Garling character analysis, but as a sneak peek of that, I think it's very possible that Garling is aiming for the throne of the world, both during this incident and currently as a Gorosei member. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on all the dialogue that comes out of this man's mouth, because I think he is a man with a lot more importance than we all originally thought, and he could be the one orchestrating a lot of the fighting happening on God Valley, which then led him to that larger-than-life experience that caused him to earn a Gorosei spot currently in the story. And again, the events of his fighting on God Valley could foreshadow the impact he's going to have on the future of the story. We know Dragon was present at God Valley now. Could this mean that Dragon and Garling are going to have a fight in the future of the story? Could it be setting up a different matchup? Just the fact that we know virtually nothing about Garling, other than the fact that he is Shanks and Shamrock's father, means that any peep out of him will be extremely important for the story. So there's a lot we need to keep an eye out for these 4 characters and their impact on the story at God Valley, but there is a secret 5th character that I feel like a lot of people are forgetting about, despite their appearance last chapter. And that is King Harold of Elbaf. We saw last chapter he showed up at Pirate Island to try and stop Rox from making it to God Valley, and all of a sudden, without showing us the conclusion to that incident, Rox is at God Valley. So what happened to Harold? A lot of people also forget that this flashback is the Loki and Harold flashback at its core, and that Harold is actually very intertwined with the events at God Valley, considering he was tasked with killing Rox to earn his world government affiliates. So I just find it hard to believe that Oda would include all of those character plot threads in this flashback and not have them come to their conclusion at the conclusion of the flashback at God Valley. This is a weird one to predict though, because we saw what Harold's last day on this planet looked like, and it looked a lot like Adomi Reversi where he was taken over by Emu, but that was more than 20 years after the God Valley incident, so it's extremely unclear what influence that Harold will have on God Valley in the first place. Will he become this tragic character who sides with the world government on God Valley, regrets his decision, and ends up wallowing in sadness for the next 20 years as a world government operative? Or will he betray the world government, go to help his friend Rox again at God Valley, and get taken over by Emu for the next 20 years as the head of Elbaf? There's a lot of possibilities for this character, and I'm really excited to see what Oda does, but the most important thing here is to realize that this is his flashback, so it is undoubtedly certain that he is going to have a massive impact on the God Valley incident. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. If you want to keep up with the God Valley incident and a bunch of theories and analysis that spawn from this incident as chapters continue to release, make sure to subscribe. I'm going to be making a ton of God Valley videos. Let me know what you think about these 5 characters. Is one going to have a bigger impact than the other? Who's going to fight who? I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say. Thank you for watching, and until next time.